Welcome to another bonus episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. Hi, and welcome to another special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. I'm Adam, and today I'm going to talk about Gnolls again. I know we just did that a little while ago, but I want to strike kind of while the iron is hot, because you guys have heard Dave and I pop off about rampages on the Patreon, and Dave, Terry, and I pop off about Gnolls on the public channel. Now, we've talked about Gnolls a few times. I think this was the fourth episode that we've done, but the first three were all based on 5th edition rules, and that was like 200 and some odd episodes ago. So it's been a while, and I wasn't planning on doing this episode until I woke up yesterday morning and found that there was an email sitting in our inbox from one of the listeners. And I sat down and I read it, and I went back and forth thinking about it over and over again, and it was just something that I couldn't let lie. So I wrote a bit of a script. I'm going to go through it here. I'm going to address the points in the email, and hopefully you guys will enjoy this. I think it's a really good discussion to have. So here was the notes, or the email that I got, the notes that I written about it, and then I kind of slapped the trappings of an episode on top of it. So buckle up. I'm hoping this will be a little bit short and sweet, but you know me, I tend to ramble. So I wanted to give a little special episode dedicated to a response from an email that we received from a listener named Jordan, who had some ideas about the episode we released about the new Gnolls. I'm assuming he, but Jordan's a gender-neutral name, so my apologies if I'm wrong on this one. Anyway, he makes some great points that I feel are worth adding to the conversation, especially when it comes to tactics and playing Gnolls at the table. Now, as a spoiler, he disagrees wholeheartedly with where we landed in the episode, and I don't necessarily think he's wrong. I think he's coming at this from a very different perspective, and that his perspective might be a very common one, which is why I wanted to make this an episode, not just an email response. So, surprise, Jordan. I didn't tell you I was doing this, but here we go. I want to point out that we thrive on these kind of emails. And I mean, we absolutely fucking thrive on them. I love getting stuff like this, and I have typed pages and pages and pages in the past where I then stop and sit down and go, oh shit, I should have just made that an episode. Fortunately, my brain was working, so here we are. I want to say, I love getting these little discussions, and we all do. Prove us wrong on things, and we thrive. It makes us better DMs, and it makes anybody else that is aware of this conversation a better DM as well. So don't go after Jordan in the comments, because he's absolutely right about his critiques and arguments about the episode. And instead, let's embrace what he has to say, because listening to other DMs will make us all better DMs and better people. And I'm actually going to start off with the end of the email, because I personally take to heart what he had to say. He finishes off by saying, anyway, it probably sounds like I don't like your guys' show, but in fact the opposite is the truth. I love the way you guys break stuff down and share your ideas. There are a ton of actual play podcasts out there, but I don't think there are enough quote-unquote how-to-play podcasts out there, and you guys do a good job of getting a variety of viewpoints from many different players/DMs. Ironically, not on this episode. Keep up the good work. And I think he's right. We echo-chambered a little bit on the Gnolls episode, and that's likely to happen sometimes when you've got a bunch of friends from the same part of the world that sit at a lot of the same D&D tables, sit down and talk about things. We don't often agree, but we don't often straight up disagree with anybody. And different DMs with different play styles and different mentalities is, I think, what makes It's a Mimic what it is, for better or worse. And if you'll allow me a little moment of navel-gazing before we get to the good stuff, I just want to say, peek behind the curtain here. I've told anyone who will listen that I don't want this. I never want this to be the Adam Show. Never. The only reason I'm on so many episodes is because we put out a lot of content. The other hosts have busy schedules and lives, and I'm usually available to cover someone if they cancel last minute. I don't make any money off this podcast. This doesn't necessarily stroke my ego. As a matter of fact, I get absolutely flayed by comments on a semi-frequent basis. YouTube comments can be pretty brutal, as most of you can assume, and they tend to come after me and a couple of the other hosts fairly frequently, but I'm the one that has to sift through them. So it's not an ego-stroking thing, it's not a money thing. The other artists, the editors, the other crew members, all that, they get a paltry little Christmas bonus from whatever's left over from the Patreon dollars that come in after all the fees and purchases and bills and everything else that running the podcast requires to stay afloat. So the thing that I get out of this is a melding of ideas and a stream of conversations about creativity. I get to sit down and talk to my friends about it, and I get to talk with some of you about it. And so, honestly, thank you, Jordan, for the kind words. It means a world to me. I love to hear that we're doing something that's different and unique and is going to make people think, even if they don't always agree with us. All that aside, let's get to Gnolls. He says, and he starts off with, "Hey guys, I just finished listening to the Gnoll episode and I have to disagree with a few points. Rampage has become more useful," because in the episode we said it was less useful. "Previously, you could only use the Rampage when you dropped a creature to 0 hit points. When you're dealing with PCs, that doesn't happen all the time, especially if the PCs are a slightly higher level and you're using the Gnolls as a horde. As for using it multiple times, I don't think I've ever had a Gnoll reduce a creature to 0 hit points more than once before it's killed. This also means that only one Gnoll can use this ability per target. Now, you can have your pack of Gnolls firing arrows as they move toward the party, and by the time the pack closes the distance, there will likely be a player below half hit points. That means that every Gnoll that hits that character with their bow then gets to charge forward and make a rend attack. Plus, you can still use it the same way as before, or if you drop a creature to 0 hit points, that means you damaged it while it was bloody, or you don't move and you just use the extra attack. I do think that putting the once per day restriction on it makes it unnecessarily mechanically clunky. I would have a hard time keeping combat flowing while trying to keep track of which Gnoll used its rampage. I would probably make a pool of rampage points, which would kind of represent a collective frenzy that they would wear out as the combat drags on, and the knowledge of victory for the Gnolls wanes. I'm going to interrupt him now because there's more to the email. I just want to say these are all good points. And I think that we're seeing a difference in play styles here. There's more to the email. I'm going to go over it all in a minute, but let's knock these out of the way first. First of all, he's right about the mechanics. No arguments from me. Everything he says is accurate. From a completely tactical perspective, the idea of firing from a distance until the players are significantly wounded is absolutely the smartest way to go. His method, Jordan's method, is tactically superior. And I love that for hobgoblins, devils, modrons, and any other rank and file army. But I play Gnolls as a ravenous personification of hunger. If any enemy is 100, 150, 200 feet away, my Gnolls would rather dash than launch attacks, because teeth need flesh, throat needs blood, stomach needs food. And because I've run Gnolls that way, that's what Terry and Dave, who have both been players at my table, that's how they run them too. Hence the echo chamber of the episode. When we went through Gnolls a couple hundred episodes ago for 5th edition, we discovered that Inogu magically steals the food from every Gnoll gullet and transports it into his own. In my post-credits ramble about Gnolls for 4th edition on the most recent episode, I talked about a kind of Gnoll that will chomp on and even kill other Gnolls due to the hunger they feel. This, to me, says less tactics, more desperation, and so I run them that way. Jordan clearly runs them as a raiding party, where I run them as a nearly mindless existential threat. And with a 6 to intelligence, I could argue that it could go either way. They're slightly smarter than a hill giant, which means that they're not superior tacticians by any means, but they have the experience in raiding that they would know what effective tactics are, but also their intelligence could get overrun by a desperation and a hunger. As you can see, these different playstyles and the tactics that he discusses are very obvious. In my scenarios, Gnolls close the distance quickly. I think we even complained in the episode that Gnolls feel too slow in the new rule set. And then they focus on one victim until that victim is dead. Emboldened and empowered by an immediate victory, they should immediately move on to the next victim and at a breakneck speed. That's how Rampage should work, in my opinion. But for Jordan, Gnolls do the most damage they can as they get closer and closer more slowly, waiting for the right moment, and only when the enemy is clearly in distress and they have closed enough distance do they jump forward, pouncing forward as a group and attack, and anyone that attacks someone who's bloody will get this bonus all at once instead of just the person who got the kill. I really like both of these tactics. I prefer Jordan's tactic for an orc horde, or maybe Yugoloths, and maybe he prefers my method for some low-level demons like, I was going to say the Abyssal Maw, but I don't think we have that right now. That might be a holdover from previous books. The Wretched Sorrow Swarm, for example. Or the Hungry Sorrow Swarm, right? Things that are taken over by emotion and act without sense. But both are completely valid and very different strategies that a DM should consider using. Maybe the question you need to ask, listener, when you're prepping your gnolls is, how satiated are my gnolls? Or how hungry are they? How desperate are they? And how tactical and controlling is the leader of the warband? Because I think a Flind would be able to hold them in line and use better, smarter tactics like Jordan's. But a Fang of Yinogu, who hasn't eaten for a few days, might just encourage the dash forward to eat, destroy. The next thing I want to point out is that I think the rampage points idea that Jordan said in order to keep track of it all is a great one. I'm probably going to steal this. I think it makes a lot of sense. And the final point I want to make before we move on is that Jordan says that most gnolls only get one kill in before they are killed themselves. And that makes perfect sense. They are horde monsters. They're on the more powerful side of horde creatures, but they're in it for the horde. You push them forward as a group. You tend not to run into one or two gnolls unless it's kind of like a warning shot for your players to be careful. I tend to use gnolls against villages, caravans, groups of travelers. I have more NPCs, pets, mounts, and other targets besides the PCs. Usually, but not always, my gnolls go after the weakest prey first, like hyenas do. That's an absolutely terrible idea for gnolls. The tactic is bullshit, because tactically, from Dungeons & Dragons' perspective, from a meta-knowledge place, you want to kick off a death spiral in the party as quickly as possible. Even in an in-world standpoint, take out the threats first, and then take your time with everything else. But my gnolls don't take their time. They are frantic. That's why it is a rampage. That's why they go into frenzy, right? I like it because it feels scarier, and it allows the players to witness large scales of horrors against their allies and NPCs and mounts and stuff without being immediately threatened themselves, because I'm not in it to kill player characters. These are the heroes of my story. I want them to win. But if I target a PC first, the gnolls are likely going to get slaughtered in, 4 to 5 rounds? If I double their number and aim for an entire village, I not only get a dozen brutal kills in, the combat will become a set-piece encounter that will be very memorable, and that's my big thing, is always we need memorable encounters. And the PCs have to change tactics from stand and fight to rescue as many as we can. So again, it's a matter of scenario. Dropping a low hit point villager or a dog to 0 hit points will put the gnolls into a kill move pattern that I like. The new rules that require them to bloody someone and then move, it can work in this scenario. It doesn't feel quite as scary as I've just killed this thing and now I'm coming for you. Instead of that thing is bloodied, everybody pounce on it. The new rules require them to bloody someone and then move, and I don't love it. So again, Jordan hits it from a different perspective. Against a player character with, say, 80 hit points, which is, I think, a decent place to assume, if they drop to 39 or fewer, because it's, half or less, right? All the nearby gnolls attack, and converging on them would be absolutely terrifying, because you are sitting there taking a bunch of damage from these longbows, or maybe one of them got in your face and knocked you right down to 40 or below, and then everything comes at you. That's scary for that one player character. The players at the table will start to really fucking pay attention, right? And again, the questions become whether or not this is a straight PC versus gnoll fight, what shape the party is in when the gnolls attack, like are they already kind of damaged, how much healing gets used in a combat, because are we just going to have the 2 clerics in the party, back up they go, and we're never going to get to the bloodied condition, right? And is this a random encounter or a set piece moment? Because I'm not a fan of killing player characters in random encounters if I can help it. I will, but I don't like it. I would much rather have it be an impactful story moment. Anyway, all this to say, Jordan is right the way that he runs it, and he runs it, in my opinion, a little bit smarter than gnolls deserve. I am right from my perspective, but I run them dumb as posts, right? Which I also think is not necessarily reflected by the stat block. We're both making assumptions that they are either more or less tactical, and therefore there are 2 different methods at play here. Anyway, let's jump on to another couple of quick points that he makes. He says, you also mentioned about the difference in their dark vision and the range of their bow, and I don't particularly see this as a problem for them to be hunting at night. I would likely have the gnolls attack a party as they are taking their long rest and at their most vulnerable. This typically means campfire. The distance in between the gnolls and the party doesn't need to be illuminated, only the targets do. Now, Jordan makes an excellent point here about the illumination of the target mattering more than the distances between the target and attacker. I thought that this was a foregone conclusion, but it's worth bringing up more often in episodes that you don't need to see the space between you and what needs to be illuminated. You only need to see the illuminated space. I keep forgetting that not everyone plays with this information as a foregone conclusion in their heads, but I do, and so thank you, Jordan, for bringing that up. As for the campfire itself, that's a round one issue only, and only for the people on watch. My party has learned not to keep a campfire lit unless they absolutely have to. In a world of nighttime monsters, hiding in the dark and being a little wet or cold is better than being a beacon of meat and tastiness. And if a party is getting attacked by things in the darkness, the first thing that those targets are going to do is run and hide and get out of the light, rendering this whole light point moot, and then round two of all the attacks and the arrows are all going to be with disadvantage, and we're right back to our initial complaint. If they can even target them at all, because you would assume that they've got to be within the dark vision range, right? But still, this is a very effective ambush tactic for round one. Gnolls would absolutely do this. Most, invaders would. All the Gnolls fire at once, at the poor elf on watch, and then go. Okay, Jordan then goes on to say, even in caves/dungeons, unless every party member has dark vision, which is why I usually make an NPC a race without dark vision, if that's the case, they will also need a light source, granting vision for the 150-foot range of the bows. First of all, great tactic with the NPCs, Jordan. That's inspired and brilliant, and I love how you're thinking. Mounts and pets are also going to be helpful with this. It's going to force people to light torches and to pull out lanterns and to cast dancing lights, whatever it is that's going to encourage them to illuminate themselves. Second of all, you would not believe how often my party of fucking dark vision experts will just walk around in the dark. I am baffled by their decisions to do this all the time. A lot of my riddles use color as a result of this because it pulls them out of their grayscale. And I absolutely hate dark vision as a general conceit in the first place. I despise it on a lot of the creatures, and I think that it should be a magical, like an indicator of some sort of magical creature like a dragon or a beholder that is that much better than the average humanoid, and that makes them scarier. If everyone can kind of see in the dark a little bit, who gives a shit? But I also understand that we don't want to track torches, so here we are. I should start punishing my players for sitting around in the dark. Jordan, I'm going to make a note of that. Thank you for the reminder. And a reminder for everybody, it's just because you have dark vision does not mean you can see in the dark. It means that you see kind of well, a little bit, maybe sometimes. It is very limited still, and the world beyond your dark vision is still blackness, and other things might have better dark vision than you, so things can still see you in the dark. And of course, you can't see any color, and all of your perception and attack rolls are made with disadvantage. My last point of contention, Jordan says, is the slagging of the rend attack. I kind of expected someone wouldn't like me popping off about this, but here we go. Through all the monster stat blocks, they have been combining all bite/claw attacks into rend. He says, and this is fine by me. I don't ever recall a bite attack being better than any other weapon attack a creature would usually have. I would have to disagree a little bit. There are some bite attacks that will do extra poison damage or whatever, but it's a special thing, and it's not going to be rolled into rend, so his point is still a good one. He also says they only ever were used if rules forced them to be used through specified multi-attacks or special rules like the old Rampage. Streamlining these multiple attacks into a single attack gives me the ability to flavor it however I want, yet it makes rolling attacks way easier and faster as I don't have to worry about different rules and or damages applying to each attack. Jordan, I don't inherently disagree with you, except that we're going to lose the damage type differences between claws, bites, and tail attacks being, slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning, but I don't think that matters too much. That tends to be a monster thing more than a player thing, so it doesn't really fucking matter. And I also don't think it's stated anywhere for new DMs that rend can be any natural weapon. I think that what we are doing as experienced dungeon masters is reading between the lines and understanding the rules as intended. And I think that it would be really nice to have a little sidebar or something at the beginning of the monster manual that tells DMs this. So, and also I just hate it whenever they pull out lore or flavor, because I want to, I don't want it just to be called bite. I want it to be gnashing teeth. Like, that kind of shit is inspirational to me to see it in a monster stat block. I love it when they've got weird, unique naming conventions for the different monsters. It paints a better picture in a subtle way, but I concede your point that it is absolutely easier to use and is more malleable for dungeon masters to be able to use. So, anyway, that's all my thoughts, and that's, I guess, probably some of Jordan's thoughts in this bonus episode on Gnolls. I know most bonus episodes are on the Patreon, but I thought that this was a perfect example of how different DMs can use monsters and conflicts in different ways. And I wanted everyone to kind of hear the conversation going back and forth, because there's not a single damn thing that Jordan said that was absolutely inherently wrong. He just plays monsters differently than I do. And differently than Dave and Terry, too, apparently. It's great to hear these other perspectives, and I'm going to take everything he said about Gnolls, and I'm going to slap it onto some of the other armies that exist out there and make them far scarier. And I might even, like for orcs, take the Gnoll rampage that exists currently and port it over to them so that they are running forward when their enemies start to bleed. I think that would, and it's not going to be a rampage so much as an emboldened factor of, hey, we're winning. Victory is near. I think that's fucking great. I'm going to keep running my Gnolls as hungry, starving, ravenous morons that are just teeth and claws and an existential threat to anything they come across. But I don't want to I'm certainly not telling Jordan how to run his Gnolls, right? And I'm not telling anyone else to necessarily run them my way. You need to stop and you need to think for yourself, how do your Gnolls think? What tactics do they use? How often do you as a dungeon master sit down and say, I'm going to run these enemies suboptimally because it's a better narrative choice? And how often do you sit back and say, hey, you know what? These guys are smarter than the average creatures I use. How am I actually going to build this battlefield? How am I going to time this? And how am I going to use superior tactics to show my player characters that this is a bigger tactical threat than they might be used to? I want to give a sincere and heartfelt thank you to Jordan for emailing us, and I'm eager to have more conversations like this through our subreddit, r/itsamimic, our email address, which is in the show notes below, or through our Patreon exclusive Discord server if you happen to be on there. And thanks for listening to the special mailbag episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get. And my last thought is, if I ever get the chance to sit at Jordan's D&D table, I absolutely would. I just hope that he doesn't use Gnolls against me because his are much smarter than mine. And that is terrifying. That's all for this bonus episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, subscribe, comment, or review to help push our engagement. Thanks for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com. You can also head to itsamimic.com to find a comprehensive episode guide and more information about the show. We do have a Patreon, which not only offers access to our exclusive Discord server, but also hosts over 100 episodes, including a variety of bonus episodes covering topics like 5th edition book reviews and the campaign builder, spells and gods, fae, homebrew inspiration, and even the Blood War. If you'd like to submit any mailbag questions, please reach out to us through any of the social media links in the show notes of this episode, or send us an email at info@itsamimic.com. This has been an episode of It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.